Can you imagine stretching a single potato peel into soup for an entire family? The Great Depression transformed American kitchens into laboratories of survival. Today we're exploring 25 forgotten winter soups that kept poor families alive when a nickel meant the difference between eating and starving. Let's start with Hoover stew. Named mockingly after President Herbert Hoover, this wasn't really a stew at all, but a thin soup that became the symbol of Depression-era desperation. In 1932, relief kitchens across America served this watery concoction to millions of unemployed workers and their families. The basic recipe combined macaroni pasta with canned tomatoes and, if you were lucky, sliced hot dogs, though most versions used whatever protein scraps were available. Eleanor Roosevelt herself visited these soup kitchens and reported seeing children's eyes light up when hot dog pieces floated in their bowls. The name stuck as bitter commentary on Hoover's promise that prosperity was just around the corner. Families would stretch a single can of tomatoes with water to feed 6 people, adding corn or beans when available. The pasta, bought in bulk for pennies a pound, provided the calories that manual laborers needed. By 1933, over 3,000 community kitchens were serving variations of Hoover stew daily. Ketchup water soup. This wasn't even trying to pretend it was real food. It was pure survival in a bowl. Desperate families would swipe ketchup packets from diners, mixing them with hot water and whatever seasonings they could find. Some added crackers stolen from restaurant tables or a handful of rice if they had it. The practice became so common that many diners started locking up their condiments or charging a deposit for ketchup bottles. One Chicago waitress recalled families sending their children in shifts to collect packets, each child ordering just water while pocketing condiments. The soup provided little nutrition, but the tomato flavor and warmth gave the psychological comfort of a hot meal. Restaurant owners faced a moral dilemma: chase away hungry families or watch their profit margins disappear packet by packet. By 1934, some charitable diners deliberately left extra ketchup on tables, understanding the unspoken code of Depression survival. Potlicker soup. Southern families had been drinking potlicker, the nutrient-rich liquid left after boiling greens, for generations, but during the Depression, it transformed from a side benefit to the main meal. The vitamin-packed broth from collards, turnip greens, or mustard greens was stretched with onions and seasonings to create a soup that kept scurvy and pellagra at bay. Cornbread wasn't served on the side for taste. It was dunked and crumbled into the pot to add substance and calories. In 1931, Atlanta's Techwood Homes, the nation's first public housing project, included communal kitchens specifically for cooking large batches of greens to share the potlicker among residents. Doctors in the rural South prescribed potlicker to malnourished children, recognizing it contained more vitamins than many supplements. The practice of potlicker parties emerged where families would pool their greens, each contributing what they could grow or forage. A single bunch of collards could yield enough fortified liquid to feed a family for 2 days. Potato peel broth. Nothing illustrated Depression thrift more starkly than soup made from potato skins. Families would carefully wash and save every peel, boiling them with salt and a precious knob of fat, often bacon grease scraped from a can kept by the stove. The addition of barley, bought for 3 cents a pound, transformed this into something resembling actual food. In mining towns of Pennsylvania, children were assigned the daily task of collecting peels from neighbors who could still afford whole potatoes. The starch that leached from the skins provided minimal calories, while the skin itself contained vital minerals. Home economists published pamphlets teaching proper peel preparation to extract maximum nutrition. Some families discovered that purple potato skins created a more appetizing color, making the soup easier for children to accept. By 1935, oatmeal soup had become so common that social workers used its presence as an indicator of severe household food insecurity. Fish head chowder. Coastal families from Maine to Florida turned to the parts of fish that nobody wanted, the heads that fishmongers literally threw away. These bony discards, simmered long enough, released surprising amounts of meat from the cheeks and collar, plus collagen that gave body to the broth. Potatoes and onions, the cheapest vegetables available, bulked out the soup, while milk, if available, was added in tiny amounts for richness. Portuguese and Italian fishing families taught their neighbors how to extract every morsel of nutrition, including sucking the eyes, considered delicacies in their home countries, but desperation food in America. Fish heads that previously went to fertilizer or cat food suddenly had value. Some fishmongers began charging a nickel for a bucket that would have been free in 1929. The soup required careful straining to remove bones, a task usually assigned to older children who learned to identify every dangerous piece. Bread panata. This ancient poor man's dish found new life in Depression America as families discovered that even moldy bread could be salvaged into soup. The technique, boiling stale bread with water or thin milk, created a porridge-like consistency that filled stomachs, if nothing else. Italian grandmothers taught neighbors to brown onions or garlic first, adding depth to what was essentially wet bread. Some versions included a beaten egg stirred in at the end, though eggs were precious commodities, saved for Sunday, if at all. Bakeries began selling day-old bread specifically for panata, advertising it as soup bread for 2 cents a loaf. The dish became so associated with poverty that children were embarrassed to admit their families ate it, though virtually every household had their own version. Catholic churches distributed blessed bread specifically for making panata during Lent, combining spiritual and physical sustenance. Onion soup with sops. Unlike its refined French cousin, Depression onion soup was onions and water, perhaps enriched with a spoonful of saved bacon fat, topped with sops, pieces of stale bread that absorbed the liquid and provided bulk. Onions, which stored well in root cellars and cost almost nothing, were often the only fresh vegetable available in winter. The slow browning of onions, a technique that required only time and attention, created deep flavor from minimal ingredients. Households would save onion skins to add color to the broth, removing them before serving. The bread sops weren't toasted or covered with cheese, they were simply dunked until soft enough for toothless grandparents and young children to gum. Some families added a splash of coffee to deepen the color and add complexity, a trick learned from boarding house cooks who had to make every pot look more substantial than it was. Navy bean soup. The humble navy bean became a Depression superhero. Dried beans stored indefinitely, cost 5 cents a pound, and expanded to 3 times their size when cooked. A single ham bone passed between neighbors and reused multiple times until it was white and porous, flavored enormous pots. The beans, soaked overnight to save fuel, would simmer all day on the back of the stove, requiring only occasional stirring. Government surplus programs distributed tons of navy beans, leading to jokes about Roosevelt's bullets that appeared in every meal. Families discovered that thoroughly mashed beans created a creamy texture without dairy, stretching the soup even further. Church suppers centered around enormous pots of navy bean soup, where a donation of a few cents bought a bowl and a chunk of cornbread. The protein from beans became crucial as meat disappeared from most tables. Nutritionists later calculated that bean soup kept entire communities from severe malnutrition. Split pea soup. Faster cooking than whole beans and naturally creamy when cooked down, split peas provided comfort food that required minimal fuel, a crucial consideration when every piece of coal counted. The traditional ham bone was often replaced with salt pork rinds or even just heavy salting. Families learned that split peas didn't require soaking, saving precious overnight hours when hungry children needed food immediately. The soup's thickness meant it could be spread on bread like a paste when cold, serving double duty as sandwich filling. Street vendors in cities sold cups of split pea soup for 3 cents, often the only hot meal available to day laborers. Some households added carrots, not for flavor, but for color. The bright orange made the gray-green soup more appealing to children who were beginning to show signs of food aversion from monotonous meals. Cabbage and potato soup. These two vegetables that stored well in root cellars became the backbone of winter survival. Cabbage, which could last months when properly stored, cost 2 cents a head in season. Combined with potatoes, the other reliable keeper, families had a soup base that could feed many on pennies. The trick was cooking the cabbage long enough to eliminate bitterness while maintaining some texture. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings, though some families saved celery leaves dried in summer to add flavor. The soup improved with age, developing deeper flavors as it sat, which meant a single pot could provide meals for days. German and Polish immigrants taught neighbors about fermenting cabbage into sauerkraut, which added probiotics and tang to the otherwise bland soup. Social workers noted that families who maintained root cellars with cabbage and potatoes showed better health outcomes through the harsh winters of 1933-1935. Vegetable scrap soup. Nothing exemplified Depression ingenuity more than soup made from parts of vegetables previously considered garbage. Carrot tops, celery leaves, onion ends, wilted outer lettuce leaves, everything went into the pot. Families kept a soup bag in their icebox or cold pantry, adding scraps throughout the week until there was enough for a pot. The randomness of ingredients meant no two batches tasted alike, which actually helped combat food monotony. Children were taught to recognize which scraps were safe. Potato eyes needed removal, tomato leaves were poisonous, but radish greens added peppery flavor. Some women formed soup clubs where members contributed their scraps to create more varied and nutritious communal pots. The practice became so widespread that Extension Services published guides on which vegetable parts contained the most nutrients, revolutionizing how Americans thought about food waste. Lentil soup. Lentils, the forgotten legume before the Depression, suddenly appeared in every grocery store as families discovered they cooked in 30 minutes instead of hours, like other dried beans. At 4 cents a pound, red or green lentils provided protein and iron, crucial for preventing anemia in children. The small size meant they cooked evenly without pre-soaking, saving both time and fuel. Middle Eastern immigrants introduced Americans to proper lentil preparation, teaching that browning onions first and adding them last preserved distinct flavors in the muddy-looking soup. Some families discovered that a handful of rice added to lentils created a complete protein. Though they didn't understand the science, they just knew their children had more energy. Urban settlement houses served lentil soup daily, calculating that 10 cents worth of lentils could provide 20 servings when properly stretched. Barley vegetable soup, pearl barley, polished. To remove the hull became a Depression staple because it was cheaper than rice and more filling than pasta. At 3 cents a pound, barley expanded dramatically when cooked, turning thin broth into something substantial. The grain's slightly nutty flavor meant it could stand alone with just onions and salt when vegetables were scarce. Families learned to toast barley in a dry pan first, developing deeper flavors without adding any cost. The soup's thick, porridge-like consistency, when cooled, meant it could be sliced and fried like polenta for breakfast, stretching one pot into multiple meals. Scottish and Jewish immigrants shared their traditional barley soup recipes, introducing Americans to the grain's versatility beyond animal feed. Farm families often had access to whole barley, which they'd polished themselves using improvised mills, keeping the nutritious bran for other uses. Rice and onion soup. In southern states where rice grew, this simple combination became a survival staple. A quarter cup of rice could expand into enough soup for 4 people when cooked with thinly sliced onions and whatever fat drippings had been saved. The starch from the rice created body, while slow-cooked onions provided sweetness and depth. Families discovered that toasting rice before adding liquid created a nuttier flavor that masked the lack of meat or proper stock. Some added a bay leaf if they had one, passing it between households like a treasured commodity. The soup served triple duty: dinner, breakfast, porridge when cold, and fried rice cakes when left over. Chinese immigrants in California taught neighbors to save rice washing water for soup base, capturing vitamins that would otherwise go down the drain. By 1934, rice and onion had become such a standard that it appeared on relief kitchen menus from Louisiana to Arkansas. Sauerkraut and potato soup. The fermented cabbage that many considered foreign food before the Depression became a lifesaver. Sauerkraut provided probiotics, vitamin C, and intense flavor to otherwise bland potato soup. Families learned to make their own kraut in crocks, discovering that fermentation preserved cabbage without refrigeration, while adding beneficial bacteria that aided digestion when food quality was poor. The soup required no added salt as the sauerkraut provided plenty, and the fermentation liquid itself became valuable soup base. German-American communities organized sauerkraut making bees, where women would shred and salt hundreds of pounds of cabbage for sharing. Some families added caraway seeds, saved from better times, which transformed the humble soup into something reminiscent of prosperity. The combination of fermented vegetables and potatoes provided enough nutrition that some families subsisted primarily on this soup through entire winters. Evaporated milk, corn chowder. Canned corn and evaporated milk, 2 items often available through government relief programs, combined into a soup that children actually enjoyed. The sweetness of corn masked the tinny flavor of canned milk, while salt pork scraps, when available, added the smoky flavor of better times. Families discovered that crushing some corn kernels thickened the soup without flour, stretching precious milk further. The canned liquid was never discarded. It went straight into the pot for extra flavor and vitamins. Some mothers added a pinch of sugar, claiming it brought out corn sweetness, but really making the soup more palatable for increasingly picky children showing signs of food aversion. Rural families with access to corn cobs would simmer them first, extracting surprising sweetness from what seemed like waste. The soup became so identified with relief programs that government chowder became its nickname in soup kitchens. Turnip soup. Turnips, the forgotten root vegetable that grew easily and stored well, became a Depression staple when families discovered they cost half as much as potatoes. Grated or diced turnips cooked down into a naturally creamy soup that required no dairy, just patient simmering and occasional mashing. The slightly bitter flavor was mellowed by long cooking and the addition of onions browned in precious fat. Children who claimed to hate turnips would eat the soup when hungry enough, especially when mothers learned to add a carrot for sweetness and color. The turnip greens, usually discarded by grocers, were grabbed eagerly for their vitamins. Smart families used both root and leaves. Some discovered that roasting turnips first in the oven's dying heat after baking day added caramelized flavor that transformed the humble soup. By 1935, agricultural extension services were teaching turnip cultivation specifically for soup making, recognizing its importance in maintaining nutrition. Carrot and parsnip soup. These sweet root vegetables, often growing wild or forgotten in gardens, created naturally sweet soup that needed no sugar or cream to taste comforting. Parsnips, which most Americans had forgotten how to use, grew sweeter after frost, and stored perfectly in cold cellars. Combined with carrots and cooked until soft, then mashed with a potato masher, the soup achieved creaminess through patience rather than dairy. The natural sugars meant children would eat it without complaint, crucial when every calorie counted. Families learned to save parsnip seeds from the previous year, growing them in marginal soil where nothing else thrived. The soup's orange color was psychologically warming, important during gray winters when depression, both economic and emotional, threatened household stability. Some women added a single apple, chopped fine, claiming it was for flavor, but really adding crucial vitamins for children showing signs of nutritional deficiency. Beet and cabbage borscht. Eastern European immigrants introduced their American neighbors to borscht, the beet soup that could be served hot or cold and improved with age. Beets, often available for gleaning after commercial harvest, provided dramatic color that made the soup seem richer than it was. The addition of vinegar, cheaper than lemons, gave necessary acid while helping preserve the soup without refrigeration. Cabbage bulked out the beets, and some families added a single potato for substance. The soup's vivid purple color initially shocked American palates, but its sweet, earthy flavor and filling nature won converts. Jewish communities organized borscht-making sessions where women shared techniques for extracting maximum flavor. Some roasted beets first, others grated them raw. The soup provided iron crucial for preventing anemia, particularly in pregnant women who couldn't afford prenatal care. Ukrainian families taught others to save beet kvass, the fermented liquid, as a tonic and soup starter. Chicken necks and backs soup. Butchers practically gave away necks and backs, the parts with little meat but plenty of flavor when simmered long enough. These bones, which might have gone to dogs in prosperous times, became the foundation of soup that sustained entire families. Patient simmering extracted every bit of collagen, creating rich broth that belied its humble origins. Children learned to carefully pick meat from the bones, a task that kept them occupied while teaching the value of not wasting anything. The addition of rice or noodles made from flour and water stretched the soup into multiple meals. Some families formed soup bone circles, where they'd pass the same bones between households, each family adding vegetables and extracting additional flavor. The practice required trust and cooperation, strengthening community bonds during desperate times. Butchers, initially giving bones away, began charging a nickel per pound as demand increased. Mixed dried bean soup. When families couldn't afford a full pound of any single bean variety, they bought mixed remnants, the broken and mixed beans sold cheap at day's end. The combination of pinto, kidney, black, and lima beans created complex flavor and texture that single varieties lacked. Each type cooked at different rates, meaning some dissolved into creaminess while others stayed whole, creating natural variety in monotonous diets. The overnight soaking water was never discarded but used as soup base, capturing vitamins and minerals. Churches organized bean blessing ceremonies where donated beans were consecrated and distributed, adding spiritual meaning to physical sustenance. Women discovered that adding a tablespoon of vinegar to cooking beans reduced the gas that plagued undernourished digestive systems. The protein from mixed beans proved more complete than single varieties, though nutrition science wouldn't confirm this for decades. Savory oatmeal soup. Oatmeal wasn't just for breakfast anymore. Cooked with onions and salt instead of sugar, oats created filling soup that cost virtually nothing. Scottish immigrants had long known about savory porridge, but Depression-era Americans discovered it from necessity. The oats, bought in bulk for 2 cents a pound, thickened dramatically when cooked, creating creamy texture without dairy. Some families added wild herbs, dandelion leaves, lamb's quarters, or purslane, foraged from vacant lots. The soup could be cooled, sliced, and fried like scrapple, providing variety from a single base ingredient. Parents discovered that calling it cream soup instead of oatmeal made it more acceptable to children who associated oats with breakfast. Extension agents promoted oat soup as complete nutrition, though they quietly worried about the long-term effects of such limited diets. Drop dumpling soup. When there was nothing but flour, water, and perhaps an egg or a splash of milk, families made drop dumplings, spoonfuls of thick batter dropped into boiling salted water or thin broth. The dumplings expanded dramatically, turning water into something that seemed like a meal. Southern families called them slicks. German families knew them as spätzle, but everyone understood them as poverty food that filled bellies. The technique required no special tools, just a spoon and pot, making it accessible to even the most destitute households. Mothers learned to flavor the dumplings themselves with wild onion, dried herbs, or bacon grease, making up for the bland liquid. Some added baking powder when available, creating lighter dumplings that seemed more substantial. The sight of dumplings bobbing in Potlicker became so associated with hard times that many Depression children couldn't eat them as adults. Mulligan stew. Born in hobo camps but adopted by desperate families, Mulligan stew represented community survival through shared resources. Everyone contributed something: an onion, a potato, a carrot, a handful of beans, creating soup that was different each time, but always filling. The Mulligan maker, usually an experienced cook, knew how to balance contributions and stretch ingredients to feed everyone. Railroad camps formalized the practice with scheduled Mulligan nights, where workers pooled resources. The randomness taught acceptance. You ate what the pot provided without complaint. Urban versions emerged in tenements where hallway kitchens became community soup centers. The practice required swallowing pride, admitting you needed help, but built bonds that lasted lifetimes. Gizzard and rice soup. Chicken gizzards, the muscular organs that ground food in living birds, were tough, cheap, and available when nothing else was. Simmered for hours until tender, they provided protein and rich flavor that elevated simple rice soup. The lengthy cooking required to tenderize gizzards meant this was a weekend soup, started Saturday night for Sunday dinner. Families learned to clean gizzards properly, removing the silver skin and bitter yellow lining that could ruin the entire pot. The resulting broth was so rich that a single pound of gizzards could flavor soup for 10 people. Some added hearts and livers when available, creating giblet soup that provided iron crucial for combating widespread anemia. Children who initially resisted the unusual texture learned to appreciate the meat when it was the only protein available for weeks. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed learning about these 25 forgotten soups, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.